program was recorded at the ARC Annual Industry Forum in Orlando, Florida. I'm pleased to welcome Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Brain, Russell Goodman.
Joining us for a conversation today on Vested Outsourcing is Kate Vitasek, on the faculty of the Center for Executive Education at the University of Tennessee. Kate, welcome.
Thank you, Russell.
Kate, you've just published a book, and I just want to make sure I get the title correct. It's Vested Outsourcing, 5 Rules That Will Transform Outsourcing. Now, what prompted you to write this book?
Well, Russell, I've had the unique opportunity to look at outsourcing from 4 different angles. First, working for Microsoft, designing and developing outsourced solutions with their third-party logistics providers and other service providers that they had. Second, being on the service provider side. I worked for a billion-dollar service provider. Then in 2002, I started my own consulting company where we actually helped companies define metrics, create supplier dashboards, and look at performance management with their suppliers. And lastly, 4 years ago, the University of Tennessee asked me to lead a research project around outsourcing. The Air Force had given the University of Tennessee a $35 million contract to study various outsourcing problems and issues. And one of those issues was trying to find a better way to outsource services.
Now, in your book, I understand that you highlight the 10 most common outsourcing problems. Share with us, if you will, what are the 2 that you see most frequently?
Well, number 1 would be the zero-sum game. In most outsourcing relationships, we sit across the table from our partner instead of sitting on the same side of the table solving a problem. At the end of the day, businesses are in the business to make money. And if we put that at the heart of what we're trying to do, we can really come up with some solutions driving out non-value-added waste and inefficiencies out of the process that will fund both of us to achieve our goals. The company to reduce their cost and improve their service, and the service provider to improve their margins. The second is what I call the activity trap, and the activity trap is where we outsource based on transactions instead of results. And so the company or the service provider gets paid every time they do an activity. A cash register will ring for every pallet that's stored, every product that's counted, every unit that's shipped. And it really creates a perverse incentive where I, as a service provider, don't have a vested interest to actually reduce the inefficiencies because I'm getting paid on those transactions. So we need to flip that to a results-oriented or an outcome-based oriented approach.
Now, you have 5 rules that address the ailments that you just described. What are these 5 rules, and how do they address the problems?
Well, rule number 1 gets to the heart of that activity trap, and that is having an outcome-based versus a transaction-based business model. We want to be able to incentivize, create a business model where the service provider is incented to actually reduce the number of activities and achieve our results. Instead of being paid for an activity, we want to pay them for our results. Rule number 2 is focus on the what and not the how. Right? I call this the outsourcing paradox. We outsource to the experts, yet we tell them exactly how to do everything in our detailed statement of works. So we really need to get away from that how mentality into the what. And our service providers are smart and they can solve for those problems. Rule number 3 is to create a clearly defined and measurable outcomes. If we're going to shift to this outcome-based model, we better know exactly how we define success and how we're going to measure success, because our payment structures are going to be based on that. Which leads to rule number 4, having a pricing model that uses incentives to help us solve for those cost-service trade-offs. Many companies approach business as trade-offs. You can reduce your cost, but it may come at the expense of service. Or service provider, bring our costs down, and it comes at the expense of margin. The real companies who are very good at what they do, the experts, will actually solve for those trade-offs and achieve what we call trade-ups. But we need to have a pricing model that will allow for that. And lastly, rule number 5 is to create a governance structure that allows us to have insight versus oversight. All too often, we find that companies are micromanaging their suppliers, and instead what we need to do is use our data and our information to bring insight into that relationship.
Now, Kate, it occurs to me that some viewers familiar with outsourcing may say, well, wait a minute, vested outsourcing sounds to me like performance-based outsourcing. Are they the same thing, or is there a difference?
Well, good question, and my answer is it depends. If you define performance-based outsourcing the way I define it, it is the same. The problem is the term performance-based outsourcing usually gives a connotation that it's okay if we just take our existing contract, slap on some metrics, and tie a bonus to it, and voila, we have a performance-based deal. In reality, that is not a performance-based deal, and that's why I really like the word vested outsourcing. When the publisher came to us and asked us to write a book about our research, they brought this to our attention that the term performance-based outsourcing really didn't give the right connotation of what it meant to have a good deal structure. And that's why we like vested outsourcing, because it really a vested deal, a company or a service provider who isn't working in your it doesn't have a vested interest in your performance, really isn't a relationship worth having at all.
Are you confident that 3PLs and customers are ready for vested outsourcing?
I think the enlightened ones are. But not everybody's enlightened. And when I use the term enlightened, what I mean is you've realized that the same way you've been doing outsourcing is delivering the same results, and that now it's time for a change.
Walk us through what challenges you see, though, to implementing the rules that you've been talking about.
Well, since this is a different approach, it's a paradigm shift, and we are doing things differently, having the mental fortitude to go at and almost jump off with a leap of faith, that playing by the rules, playing with a what's in it for we philosophy, as I like to say, is really good for you. And most of the time, businesses and individuals have gone to business schools learning how to win at the expense of others. And we need to get away from that mentality. And companies who really are enlightened have come to the conclusion that when I win at the expense of my service provider, or vice versa, it's really not in my economic best interest. We really need to play together to have a good long-term solution and relationship.
I suppose it's fair to say that every good book deserves a sequel. So what areas are you researching related to vested outsourcing that might provide fodder for a sequel?
Well, we actually are working on a sequel as we speak. The first book really told about the process and the rules, and the second book is going to profile 3 companies who will tell their story about how they've transformed their outsourcing philosophies and relationships to have a vested solution with their providers.
Well, Kate, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Russell.
Kate Vitasek, University of Tennessee, speaking with us today about vested outsourcing. Thanks for watching.